My brother got a new car. I got socks. Then they saw my bank statement at dinner. The socks were still in my lap when my mom leaned across the table and said, a little too brightly, "See? We did get you something, Maddie." Her smile was aimed at the people on either side of her like she needed witnesses. The restaurant was warm and dim, the kind of place with amber lights and heavy menus, and everything smelled like rosemary and melted butter. Across from me, my brother Logan had his new car keys on the table right next to his water glass, right where everyone could see them. He kept spinning them absent-mindedly, metal clicking softly against the wood every time he shifted. Dad was mid-story to the waiter about how it's been a big year, and my aunt was already laughing like she'd been told the punchline in advance. I stared down at the ribbon on the sock box, gray, cheap satin, and tried to keep my face steady. My cheeks felt hot, like I'd leaned too close to a heater. Logan lifted his eyebrows at me and said, "Don't make it weird." He said it with that casual confidence he always had, like he could decide how everyone should feel. My throat tightened, and I forced myself to breathe through my nose so I wouldn't say something sharp and humiliating in the middle of Dad's birthday dinner. I slid the sock box onto the empty chair beside me and put my hands flat on my thighs like I was trying to keep them from shaking. Logan's keys caught the light again when he flipped them, and it made my stomach twist in this stupid, petty way I hated myself for. I looked up and met my dad's eyes for a second, hoping, without even knowing what I wanted from him, that he'd notice, that he'd say something, that he'd at least look uncomfortable. Instead, he smiled at the waiter and asked for the good cut of steak like tonight was a reward ceremony and Logan was the main event. Mom squeezed my forearm under the table, not comforting, more like a reminder, play nice. My aunt leaned in and said, "At least socks are practical," in that sing-song voice people use when they want to pretend something isn't cruel. Logan smirked and took a sip of his drink, eyes on me like he was waiting for the moment I cracked so he could call me dramatic. It was a Thursday night in early December, and Dad had decided we were doing a family dinner for his birthday, proper restaurant, reservations, the whole thing. It was also, conveniently, the week my parents had finished helping Logan out with a car because he needed something reliable for work. Logan is 2 years younger than me, and he's the kind of person who always seems to be on the edge of something big, at least in his own head.
He's charming.
He's loud. He tells stories. He makes everyone laugh. He also has a long history of quitting jobs because the manager disrespected him, or starting a new plan and abandoning it the second it gets boring. Somehow, that never translated into consequences. In my parents' minds, it translated into potential. He wasn't irresponsible. He was figuring it out. I'm the older one, the steady one, the one who moved out early, paid rent, finished uni, got a job, and didn't need rescue. Which sounds like a compliment until you live inside it. Because for years, Madeline's fine wasn't praise.
It was permission to ignore me.
It wasn't always like this. When we were kids, my parents were fair in the obvious ways. Same birthdays, same Christmas budgets, same school supplies. But as we got older, the gap widened in this quiet, almost invisible way. When Logan messed up, my parents treated it like a temporary storm. When I struggled, they treated it like a personal failure I should solve privately. Logan got bailed out of credit card debt after a rough patch. I got a lecture when I mentioned I was stressed about rent. Logan moved back home at 24 and it was smart financial planning. I stayed in a tiny share house and it was character building. Logan's mistakes were learning experiences. My caution was being boring. Their support for him was because he needs it. Their lack of support for me was because you don't. 2 months before this dinner, Dad called me and said, "We're thinking of helping Logan with a car." He sounded careful, like he was already bracing for me to complain. I was standing in my kitchen with a grocery bag on the counter, fingers cold from holding a carton of milk. "Okay," I said.
Cool.
Good for him. Dad let out a relieved breath and then said, "Just don't make it weird, Maddie. He's been trying." That sentence stuck to me like lint. Don't make it weird. As if noticing unfairness was the real problem. I didn't ask for anything. Not because I didn't want anything, but because I knew the script. If I asked, I'd get the look, disappointed, confused, and then the same line. But you're doing fine. And I was doing fine, technically. I had a job. I paid my bills. I wasn't drowning, but I'd worked myself into fine. I'd built it out of late nights, cheap groceries, and saying no to everything that wasn't necessary. I didn't have a safety net because apparently I was the safety net. The sock box in my lap felt like a joke I was supposed to laugh at. Halfway through dinner, Logan started doing what he always does when there's an audience. He made jokes about the car, about how he finally upgraded, about how he couldn't believe he'd been driving a death trap before. He kept slipping the keys into conversation like a prop. When I was locking it earlier, when I was adjusting the mirrors, Dad laughed too loudly at everything he said, the way he does when he's proud. Mom kept asking Logan questions about the features like she was interviewing him for a magazine. My aunt, Dad's sister, added little comments like he deserves it and he's going places, like she was narrating a movie. I ate slowly, mostly to give my hands something to do. The restaurant was noisy around us, glasses clinking, people talking, the low hum of music, but our table felt like a spotlight. Then Logan leaned back and said, "Honestly, I needed that car. I'm trying to level up." He looked at me, grin wide. "You wouldn't get it. You've always been safe." Safe, I repeated before I could stop myself. He nodded, like he'd said something true and insightful.
Yeah.
You don't take risks. You just work your little job and do your little routines. My chest tightened. I could feel my face heating again, and it wasn't just embarrassment now. It was that familiar frustration, the one that sits behind my ribs like a held breath. Mom gave a small laugh and said, "Logan, don't tease." But she didn't sound upset. She sounded amused. Dad took a sip of wine and said, "Your sister's always been careful." Careful. In our family language, careful meant small. Careful meant don't ask. Don't rock the boat.
Don't need anything.
I set my fork down, gently, because I could feel my fingers starting to tremble. "You don't know what I do," I said. Logan's eyebrows lifted. "Oh yeah?
Tell us.
Tell us about your thrilling life." My aunt leaned in, eyes bright.
Come on, Maddie.
"You're always so quiet. Don't you have anything exciting going on?" I did, actually. I had something huge going on. But I'd kept it to myself because I didn't trust them with it. Not in a paranoid way. In a learned way. The bank statement was in my bag because the next morning I had a meeting with the broker. I was finalizing pre-approval for a home loan. I'd been saving like a maniac for 2 years.
No fancy holidays.
No new clothes unless something literally ripped. I tracked every expense in a spreadsheet because it made me feel like I had control over something. I'd been working extra projects and freelancing on the side, quietly, because I didn't want anyone to comment on it until it was real. And now, sitting there with socks on one side of me and car keys on the other, something in me stopped caring about being polite. Logan took another sip and said, "Maybe Mom and Dad should buy you a new personality next." It wasn't even that brutal. It was just casual. Like I was entertainment. Like he could poke at me and expect me to smile. Dad didn't say a word. That's what did it. I reached into my bag, not dramatically, just with a steady, almost detached motion, and my fingers found the folded paperwork. I pulled it out and smoothed it on the table beside my plate like I was checking a receipt. The top page had my name, the bank logo, and the current balance printed in neat black text. Dad's eyes dropped immediately, reflexive.
His posture changed.
He leaned forward without meaning to. Mom noticed and leaned too, confusion creasing her forehead. "What's that?" Logan frowned. "Are you seriously pulling out paperwork right now?" I didn't look at him. I looked at Dad. His eyes were stuck on the number like it was written in another language. His mouth parted slightly. He blinked hard. "Is that yours?" he asked, voice quieter than it had been all night. I nodded.
My throat felt dry.
"It's my bank statement." My aunt scoffed, but it sounded uncertain. "Okay, and?" Mom's hand floated toward her chest. "Madeline, how?" Logan leaned across the table, and for the first time his grin was gone. What is this? I looked at him then. You wanted me to share, I said. So I'm sharing. Dad tapped the paper once with his finger, like he needed to confirm it was real. This balance, he said slowly. That's your savings? Yes, I said. My voice shook a little on the last word because suddenly all the years of being invisible were sitting in my throat like a stone. Mom's eyes widened. Why didn't you tell us? I let out a small, humorless breath. Because every time I tell you I'm doing something, you act like it's normal. Like it doesn't count. And every time Logan breathes in a new direction, you throw a parade. Logan's face went blotchy. Oh my God, he said, laughing the wrong way. So this is what this is. You're trying to embarrass me. I didn't say anything about your car, I said, and I could hear the strain in my own voice. You all did. You all made it the center of the night. Dad finally looked up at me, and the expression on his face wasn't pride first. It was shock. Like he'd been operating with the assumption that I was fine because I was small, and now he was realizing I'd been building something real without him. I swallowed and said, I'm buying a place. I have a broker appointment tomorrow. That's why I have this. The table went quiet in a way that made me painfully aware of the restaurant noises around us. Someone laughing too loud near the bar, a plate clattering in the kitchen, the low music continuing like nothing happened. Mom reached across the table and touched my hand, tentative, like she wasn't sure I'd let her. Maddie, she whispered, I'm proud of you. It landed weird, warm, but late. Like getting a bandage after the wound has already scabbed. Dad rubbed his face with one hand, staring down at the paper again. We didn't think you needed help, he said finally, and there it was. The line. I didn't, I said, and my voice cracked just a little. Because I couldn't. Because you taught me that needing help is something I'm not allowed to do. Logan pushed his chair back slightly, like scraping. So now we're the bad guys, he muttered. On Dad's birthday. Dad's eyes snapped to him. Enough, he said, and it wasn't loud, but it was firm in a way I hadn't heard from him in years. Logan went quiet, staring at his plate like it had suddenly offended him. My aunt looked uncomfortable now, eyes darting around like she wanted an escape. Well, she said lightly, good for you, Madeline. No need to make a scene. I almost laughed. I didn't make a scene, I said. I answered a question. We finished dinner in a strange, stiff quiet. Dad barely ate. Mom kept glancing at me like she was seeing me for the first time. Logan stared out toward the street, jaw clenched, keys no longer spinning, just sitting there, heavy and still. Outside, the air was cooler, and the streetlights made the pavement look pale. Logan walked ahead to his car without waiting. Mom lingered beside me and squeezed my hand properly this time, like she meant it. You did all that alone, she said, and her voice was small. I nodded. Yeah, I said. I did. Dad stood there for a moment, looking older than he had inside, and said, we should talk.
Soon. Properly.
And, I'm sorry. He didn't add excuses. He didn't say, but.
Just sorry.
It wasn't a magic fix, but it was something. The next morning I went to my broker meeting. I got the pre-approval. I sat in my car afterward and let myself breathe, hands on the steering wheel, feeling this quiet pride that didn't need an audience. Logan didn't speak to me for a week. Then he texted, congrats, with no punctuation. Mom started asking questions about suburbs and interest rates like she wanted to be part of it now. Dad called me late one night and said, I didn't realize how much pressure we put on you by assuming you'd always be okay. I didn't forgive everything in one moment. But I told him, I'm not okay with being invisible anymore. And he said, I hear you. The socks are still in my drawer. I wear them sometimes when I'm cleaning the apartment, and I think about that dinner, not as the night I proved anything, but as the night I stopped shrinking to keep everyone comfortable. Thanks for watching, and if you've ever been the responsible one who got overlooked until people finally saw what you'd built, share your story in the comments. I really do read them, and it helps more than you'd think.